The great hall of the ruins stood silent, its towering stone pillars covered in strange carvings. A group of aliens, tall, blue-skinned, with glowing eyes, stood around a pedestal. On it lay an ancient sword, its blade dull but still sharp, its hilt wrapped in faded leather. For days, the aliens had tried to lift it. Their strongest warriors strained, their scientists scanned it with machines, but the sword did not move. It was as if it was part of the stone itself. Then, from the shadows, stepped a human. He was smaller than the aliens, his skin pale from lack of sunlight, his clothes worn. His name was Jack, a scavenger who had followed the aliens into the ruins, hoping to find something valuable. The aliens laughed when they saw him. "You think you can lift it, human?" "Even our mightiest failed," their leader said, his voice deep and mocking. Jack said nothing. He stepped forward, his eyes locked on the sword. As his fingers wrapped around the hilt, a strange warmth spread through his hand. The carvings on the walls began to glow. And then, with a smooth, effortless motion, he lifted the sword. The aliens gasped. The ground trembled. And Jack, the simple human, felt power surge through him. Something had awakened. The moment the sword left the pedestal, the air itself seemed to hum. The blue-skinned aliens staggered back, their glowing eyes wide with shock. Their leader, a towering figure with scars across his chest, clenched his fists. "Impossible," he growled. "No species has ever." But before he could finish, the ground beneath them trembled violently. Dust rained from the ceiling as ancient mechanisms hidden within the ruins groaned to life. The carvings on the walls pulsed with a golden light, forming symbols none of them could read, except, perhaps, Jack. The human gripped the sword tightly, his breath quickening. It felt familiar, as if it had been waiting for him. A voice, faint and distant, whispered in his mind. At last. One of the aliens, a scientist with a scanner still clutched in his three-fingered hand, rushed forward. "The energy readings, it's reacting to him. The sword is alive." Jack barely heard him. His vision blurred for a moment, and then, flashes. A battlefield. Stars falling. A war fought long before his kind had even walked Earth. The alien leader snarled and drew his plasma blade. "Give it to us, human. That weapon belongs to the Zarkon Empire." Jack tightened his grip. The sword responded, its dull edge shimmering as if awakening from centuries of slumber. He didn't know how to use it. He wasn't a warrior. But something inside him, something deeper than instinct, told him he wouldn't have to. The first alien lunged. Jack swung. The plasma blade shattered like glass. Silence. Then chaos. The aliens scrambled back, their confidence broken. Jack stood there, heart pounding, staring at the sword in disbelief. It had moved on its own. And then, from the shadows of the ruins, something else stirred. The ruins groaned as hidden chambers unlocked themselves, stone grinding against stone. From the darkness emerged figures, tall, armored, their faces hidden behind masks of black metal. They moved silently, their footfalls making no sound. The blue-skinned aliens froze, their arrogance replaced by raw fear. "Keepers," whispered the alien scientist, his scanner dropping from trembling fingers. "They're supposed to be extinct." Jack barely had time to process this before the masked figures raised their hands. The air shimmered, and the alien leader was lifted off his feet by an unseen force, his body twisting unnaturally before collapsing to the ground. The remaining aliens turned to flee, but the keepers moved faster, blurs of motion, their touch leaving their victims frozen in place like statues. Only Jack was left standing. One of the keepers turned its featureless mask toward him. The sword in Jack's hand burned hotter, its glow pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. He expected to die, but instead, the keeper knelt. The voice in Jack's mind returned, clearer now. "The last blade chooses its wielder. You are the heir. Before Jack could question what that meant, the ground beneath him vanished. A trapdoor he hadn't seen opened, and he fell into darkness. He landed hard in a chamber lit by floating orbs of blue fire. The walls were covered in murals, wars between stars, a great empire falling, and a single warrior carrying this very sword, standing against an endless tide of shadows. At the center of the room stood another pedestal. On it rested a gauntlet, its metal the same strange alloy as the sword. The voice spoke again. Take it. The war is not over. Jack hesitated. He was nobody, just a scavenger, a man who'd stumbled into something far bigger than himself. But the sword hummed in agreement, and the weight of centuries pressed down on him. He reached for the gauntlet. The moment his fingers touched it, the chamber shook. Somewhere above, the keepers turned as one, sensing what had happened. And far, far away, in the depths of space, something ancient opened its eyes. The gauntlet fused to Jack's arm with a searing heat that should have burned flesh to bone, yet left him unharmed. Silver veins pulsed beneath his skin as ancient technology merged with human biology. The sword's hum deepened, resonating with the gauntlet in a harmony that vibrated through Jack's teeth. Above, the ruins trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling as the keepers moved with sudden urgency, their silent communication filling the chamber with static electricity. Jack didn't need to understand their language to know two things: they were afraid, and they were coming for him. A grinding noise echoed through the chamber as a section of the wall slid aside, revealing a narrow passage glowing with bioluminescent moss. The sword's light flared toward it, an unmistakable command. Jack ran. The passage twisted like a living thing, walls contracting and expanding as if breathing. Behind him, the keepers gave chase, their armored forms scraping against stone as the tunnel resisted their entry. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and something older, wet earth and starlight. He burst into a circular vault where the ceiling opened to a sky choked with swirling nebula clouds. At its center floated a ship, not one of the blocky alien vessels Jack had seen in scavenger outposts, but something organic, its hull resembling blackened bone fused with silver. The sword jerked in his grip, pulling him toward the ship. As his gauntlet made contact with its surface, veins of light spread across the hull. A hatch irised open, exhaling air that smelled of iron and lightning. A shadow moved at the edge of his vision. The lead keeper stood in the doorway, its mask cracked from the tunnel's wrath. It raised a hand, and Jack's muscles locked, but the gauntlet flared white-hot, breaking the hold. The keeper tilted its head. For the first time, it spoke aloud, its voice like grinding stone. They will come for it. For you. Then the ship's tendrils shot out, wrapping around Jack's waist and yanking him inside as the hatch sealed with a sound like a dying star. Darkness. Then. Consciousness flooded back with the sting of neural connections snapping into place. The walls pulsed around him as the ship whispered in a language his bones remembered. Navigation data scrolled across his vision. A destination, coordinates buried in human myth. Earth. The ship screamed through the void, its organic hull pulsing like a living heart. Jack lay sprawled across the cockpit floor, his veins still burning with the afterglow of connection. The walls around him throbbed with bioluminescent veins, casting eerie shadows that moved just beyond understanding. A voice that wasn't a voice filled the chamber, the ship speaking directly into his mind. They are coming. Through the ship's translucent skin, Jack saw them, massive obsidian vessels shaped like broken teeth, their surfaces crawling with crimson energy. The Keeper's fleet. Worse, something else moved among them, a shapeless darkness that swallowed starlight. The gauntlet on Jack's arm flared, projecting a star map. Earth blinked insistently, but between here and there lay a graveyard of dead worlds. The sword's hilt grew warm against his palm, whispering of another option. A detour. A trap. A battlefield. The ship banked violently as the first plasma bolt streaked past. Jack grabbed onto a protruding rib-like control as the cockpit reshaped itself around him, forming restraints. The voice came again, urgent. The divide or home? Choose. Jack hesitated. Earth meant safety, but whatever hunted him would follow. The divide, whatever it was, meant facing the storm head-on. Another impact rocked the ship. Warning glyphs flared across the organic console, hull integrity failing. The pursuing fleet was faster. Take me to the divide, Jack growled. The ship shuddered in response, its light turning blood red. Space itself tore open ahead, a wound in reality, swirling with impossible colors. The Keeper's ships fired desperately, but it was too late. The living vessel plunged into the rift. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the other side was wrong. A shattered planet hung suspended in the abyss, its fragments held together by chains of glowing energy. Upon its broken plain stood an army of statues, warriors frozen mid-battle, their faces twisted in eternal screams. At their center, a throne. And on that throne sat a figure in black armor, its helmeted head slowly rising to meet Jack's gaze. The sword in his hand burst into flame. The figure stood. Little air, it spoke, voice like a collapsing star. You brought my blade back to me. The armored figure took a single step forward, and the broken planet trembled. Jack's ship screamed as gravitational forces clawed at its hull, the organic metal groaning under the strain. Yet the sword's flame burned brighter, pushing back against the crushing darkness. The voice in Jack's mind fractured into two warring whispers. Kneel. From the throne. Strike. From the blade. Jack's gauntlet seared his flesh as he raised the sword. This isn't yours, he spat through clenched teeth, though he didn't know how he knew. The figure froze. Then, laughter, a sound that made Jack's vision blur with memories not his own. Battlefields. Betrayal. A blade plunged into a god's back. You don't even know what you hold, do you, child of mud? The warlord's helmet retracted, revealing a face that was human, or had been, before the skin turned to shifting smoke and the eyes became voids. That sword murdered stars. It drank civilizations. And you think it chose you for your virtue? The ship's voice cut through, the Keepers breached the divide. Reality rippled as the obsidian fleet tore through the rift behind them. The warlord's smile widened. Ah. The jailers arrive. He spread his arms. Shall we show them why their prison failed? The sword's flame turned black. Jack's body moved before he could think, a downward slash that should have cleaved the warlord in two. Instead, the blade stopped an inch above his brow, held by nothing. Good, the warlord purred. Anger is honest. He flicked a finger. The sword reversed direction, and plunged toward Jack's own heart. Time slowed as the cursed blade turned against its wielder. Jack saw his death in the warlord's starless eyes, but in that frozen instant, the ship screamed. A tendril of living metal lashed out, knocking the sword aside. The blade shrieked as it scored a molten line across the throne room floor. The warlord's smile died. Traitor, he hissed, not at Jack, but at the ship. The vessel's voice boomed through the chamber, the cycle ends today. Its hull began glowing crimson, pulses quickening like a countdown. Jack understood. So did the Keepers, their fleet suddenly reversing course, fleeing back through the rift. The warlord roared and lunged, but the ship wrapped Jack in protective tendrils as the sword flared between them, its allegiance torn. The explosion began at the planet's core. Light. Silence. Then. Jack awoke floating in wreckage, the sword clutched to his chest. The divide was gone. The warlord was gone. Only his gauntlet remained, its silver veins dull but still warm. A shadow fell over him. The Keeper's mothership loomed, its docking bay open. The choice was clear, surrender the weapon and live, or die clinging to a legacy he barely understood. Jack tightened his grip. The sword's edge caught the light of a distant sun, one that hadn't shone on this corner of the galaxy for millennia. He stepped toward the waiting ship.